It wasn't a failure of political will, it wasn't an accident of market forces, it wasn't even a conspiracy of greedy speculators. It was a mathematical inevitability engineered by a specific type of mind. Most people look for villains. They look for the politician shouting from the podium. They look for the general marching an army across the border. But history is not driven by the men on the stage. It is driven by the men in the back room who control the ledger. The pattern is unmistakable. The arithmetic is merciless throughout history. There is always a figure in the shadows. A technocrat, a quiet man with a pen. He is the one who tells the emperor that he can have his war without raising taxes. He is the one who tells the king that he can build his palace without cutting spending. He is the banker they don't want you to know about, not a specific individual, but a recurring function, a ghost, that haunts the treasury of every dying empire. He offers a solution that seems like magic. He offers liquidity. He offers the ability to print prosperity from nothing, and for a while it works. The armies march, the palaces rise, the public cheers, but the bill always comes due. The cost is not paid in gold. It is paid in the destruction of society. It is paid in the hollowed out savings of the middle class. It is paid in the collapse of order. This is not a theory. This is a historical constant. We see the same mechanism deployed in ancient Rome. We see it in the Spanish Empire. We see it in the tragedy of Weimar Germany. The names change. The technology changes. But the math remains the same. And right now, looking at the global financial system, the pattern is repeating. The incentives are aligned. The constraints are tightening. The ghost is back in the room. To understand where we are, we must look at where we have been. We must examine the mechanics of the collapse, not through the lens of battles and treaties, but through the lens of the ledger. We begin our investigation in the ancient world where the very first version of this banker appeared. He did not have a computer. He did not have a printing press. But he had a furnace, and he had a mandate from the emperor to create money where none existed. The year is to 11 AD. The location is Rome. The empire at its zenith, stretching from the mists of Scotland to the sands of Syria. But underneath the marble and the glory, the engine of the empire is seizing up. The costs of maintaining the legions, the bureaucracy, and the grain dole for the citizens of Rome have spiraled out of control. The Emperor Septimius Severus and his successors are faced with a choice. It is the same choice that confronts every government eventually. They can cut spending, which means angering the army and risking a coup. They can raise taxes, which means angering the aristocracy and risking a rebellion. Or they can listen to the quiet man in the treasury, the rationalist, who offers a third way. The solution was simple, elegant, and catastrophic. The Roman currency, the denarius, was the reserve currency of the known world. It was a silver coin trusted by merchants from India to Germania. It contained approximately 34 grams of pure silver. This purity was the anchor of the Roman economy. It was the reason a soldier would fight and a farmer would plant. But the rationalists proposed a subtle change. If they melted down the existing coins and mixed in a small amount of copper, they could mint more coins with the same amount of silver. Who would notice a 5% reduction in purity? The soldiers would still get their pay, the merchants would still sell their grain, the emperor would have a surplus. It began slowly under Septimius Severus. The silver content was reduced to about 50%. The treasury was flushed with new liquidity. The emperor raised the soldiers' pay, buying their loyalty with debased metal. For a few years, it seemed to work. The economy boomed. There was money for everything. But the laws of economics are as immutable as the laws of physics. As more coins flooded the system, each individual coin became less valuable. Prices began to tick upward. The rationalists argued that this was temporary, a result of supply chains or greedy merchants. But the arithmetic was relentless. By the time we reached the crisis of the 3rd century, the situation had spiraled. The banker in the treasury was now trapped. To keep up with rising prices, he had to mint even more coins. To mint more coins, he had to debase them further. By the reign of Gallienus in the 260s, the denarius had been replaced by the Antoninianus, a coin that was merely bronze washed in a thin layer of silver, contained less than 5% precious metal. The trust evaporated.
Think about the human cost of this mathematical trick. We have records from this period of a soldier named Aurelius. His grandfather had served in the legions and retired with a bag of silver, denarii. They purchased a farm in Italy. Aurelius served for 20 years surviving campaigns against the Goths and the Persians. When he retired, he received a wheelbarrow full of the new debased coins. But when he went to buy land, he found the prices had skyrocketed. The sellers refused to accept the bronze coins at face value. They demanded gold or goods or labor. Aurelius, a hero of the empire, died in poverty, his savings worthless. The climax of this tragedy arrived with the Emperor Diocletian in 301 AD. Faced with hyperinflation that was tearing society apart, Diocletian did not blame the debasement. He blamed the merchants. He issued the Edict on Maximum Prices, a massive bureaucratic attempt to freeze the economy by decree. The edict listed thousands of goods, from wheat to beer to lion skins, and set a maximum price for each. The penalty for violation was death. The result was exactly what economic law predicts: goods vanished from the markets. Farmers refused to bring their produce to the cities if they had to sell at a loss. The economy effectively stopped. Complex trade networks of the Roman Empire disintegrated. People fled the cities. They moved to the countryside, seeking protection on the great estates of the wealthy, working the land in exchange for food and safety. This was the end of the free Roman citizen and the beginning of serfdom. The monetary collapse birthed the feudal system. The middle class was wiped out, leaving only the ultra-rich and the serfs. The empire didn't fall because of the barbarians. The barbarians kicked in a door that was already rotting from the inside. Just like the Roman rationalists believed he could cheat the laws of value with copper the financial. Architects of the 16th century believed they could do it with a new discovery. We move now to the Spanish Empire in the 16th century. This was the first true global superpower. The sun never set on the domains of the Habsburg monarchs, Charles V and Philip II. They possessed the finest infantry in Europe, the largest navy, and a divine mandate. But more importantly, they possessed the greatest source of instant wealth the world had ever seen: the Americas. In 1545, a native prospector stumbled upon the silver mountain of Potosi in present-day Bolivia. It was a geological freak, a mountain made of nearly pure silver ore. Soon after, the mercury amalgamation process was perfected, allowing the Spanish to extract silver at an industrial scale. The treasure fleets, the Flota de Indias, began their annual voyage back to Seville, their hulls groaning under the weight of bullion. To the Spanish kings, this looked like infinite money. It looked like a blessing from God. But to the banker in this case, represented by the Genoese and German financiers like the Fugger family, who managed the royal debt, it was collateral. The Spanish crown, drunk on the promise of future silver, began to spend money they didn't yet have. They borrowed heavily to finance religious wars in the Netherlands, to fight the Ottomans in the Mediterranean, and to build the Escorial. The mechanism here was different from Rome, but the result was the same. Instead of debasing the coin, Spain imported inflation. The massive influx of silver acted just like printing money. As the silver flowed into Spain, it didn't build factories or improve agriculture. It bid up the price of everything. A bushel of wheat in Castile cost 5 times more in 1600 than it did in 1500. This is known to historians as the price revolution. The tragedy of Spain is a lesson in the difference between money and wealth. Spain had all the money, but they produced nothing. It became cheaper to buy goods from France, England, or the Netherlands than to make them in Spain. Spanish industry withered. The wool trade collapsed. The middle class, the artisans, the merchants, the producers, was crushed between rising costs and foreign competition. The life of a Spanish clerk in Seville during this time, a man we law call Miguel, illustrates the despair. Miguel worked for a shipping house. Every year he saw the galleons dock. He saw the bars of silver being unloaded. The city was awash in cash. Yet Miguel could barely feed his family. The price of bread rose every month. The rent for his small apartment doubled, then tripled. He saw the aristocrats dripping in silk and gold, oblivious to the reality that the economy was hollowing out. Miguel wrote in a letter to his brother in 1575, "There is gold everywhere, yet we starve. The more silver arrives, the poorer we become." The banker in this story, the royal treasurers and their creditors, kept the game going by issuing juros or royal bonds. They convinced the public that the silver would never stop, but the costs of empire grow exponentially, while the output of mines grows arithmetically. In 1557, Philip II did the unthinkable. He declared bankruptcy. The richest man in the world, the owner of the Americas, could not pay his debts. He didn't default just once. The Spanish crown defaulted in 155715751596, 1607, 1627, and 1647. Each default was a seismic shock. Banks in Genoa and Augsburg collapsed, savings were wiped out. The Spanish middle class was eradicated. The empire entered a long, slow, agonizing decline. The flight to hard assets was fierce. The church and the grandees bought up all the land, while the common people were reduced to beggary. Spain became a hollow shell, a warning that no amount of liquidity can replace productive capacity. Just like Spain drowned in its own silver, the 20th century saw a nation drown in paper, led by a man who believed he was a patriot. We arrive at the most terrifying case study of all, Weimar Germany. The year is 1921. The First World War is over, and Germany is crushed under the weight of the Treaty of Versailles. The reparations demanded by the Allies are staggering 132 billion gold marks. It is a debt that can never be paid. The man in charge of the Reichsbank, the central bank of Germany, is Rudolf Havenstein. Havenstein is not a villain in the comic book sense. He is a bureaucrat, a lawyer, a man of the establishment. He believes in order. He believes in the state, and he faces a dilemma. The German government is broke. The tax revenue is insufficient to pay the reparations, let alone the salaries of the civil servants, the pensions of the war widows, and the subsidies for industry. Havenstein makes the fatal choice. He decides to print the difference. He believes that by printing money, he can keep the economy moving and perhaps pay off the foreign debt in then cheaper currency. He does not understand or chooses to ignore the non-linear nature of inflation. At first, the inflation is manageable. It stimulates exports. German factories are humming because their goods are cheap abroad. The stock market soars. The banker seems to have pulled off a miracle. But the velocity of money begins to accelerate. As people realize the mark is losing value, they spend it faster. This increases prices, which forces the Reichsbank to print even more. By 1923, the situation descends into madness. Havenstein, the technocrat, approaches the problem as a logistical challenge. He is not worried about the morality of destroying the currency. He is worried about the efficiency of the printing presses. He authorizes the printing of notes with higher and higher denominations. 1,000 marks, 100,000 marks, 1,000,000 marks, 1,000,000,000 marks. The stories from this time are not just anecdotes. They are evidence of a psychological breakdown of a nation. A student in Berlin orders a cup of coffee. The price on the menu is 5,000 marks. He drinks the coffee. When he asks for the bill, the waiter tells him it is now 8,000 marks. The price has risen in the 20 minutes it took him to drink it. Workers are paid twice a day. At lunchtime, they rush to the factory gates where their wives are waiting. They throw bundles of cash over the fence so their wives can run to the bakery before the price of bread changes. If they wait until the evening, the money will be worthless. There is a famous story of a woman who brings a wheelbarrow full of cash to the butcher to buy some sausage. She leaves the wheelbarrow outside for a moment to check the line. When she comes back, the money is dumped on the ground and the wheelbarrow is gone. The thief knew the wood and iron of the wheelbarrow had value, while the yali paper was trash. The middle class, the teachers, the doctors, the civil servants who had saved all their lives in government bonds were liquidated. Their life savings could not buy a postage stamp. The social contract was broken. And in the vacuum created by this chaos, extremism festered. The people lost faith in democracy and capitalism, in the very idea of order. They were ready to listen to anyone who promised to stop the chaos. They were ready to listen to the man in the beer hall in Munich. The pattern repeats. In 7 distinct stages, it is not random. It is a progression that follows the incentives of the system. Stage 1 is sound money. The society is built on a currency that is backed by something tangible, gold, silver, or a rigid constraint on supply. Prosperity is earned through production and savings. Stage 2 is expansion. The society becomes wealthy and ambitious. The government takes on large projects, wars, welfare, monuments, expenses rise. Stage 3 is debt. The government can no longer pay for its ambitions with tax revenue alone. It begins to borrow. The banker facilitates this, creating complex instruments to hide the true extent of the leverage. Stage 4 is debasement. The debt burden becomes too heavy. The interest payments consume the budget. The government faces a choice: default or inflate. They always choose inflation. They detach the currency from its anchor. In Rome, they added copper. In Spain, they relied on silver inflows. In Weimar, they ran the printing press. Stage 5 is consumer price inflation. The newly created money floods the system. At first, it goes into assets, stocks, real estate, bonds. The rich get richer, but eventually it leaks into the real economy. The price of food and fuel begins to rise. The government blames speculators, supply chains, or foreign enemies. They never blame the ledger. Stage 6 is the crack-up boom. This is the flight to safety. The public loses faith in the currency. They panic buy anything that holds value: real estate, gold, art, commodities. The velocity of money explodes. The currency loses its function as a store of value. Stage 7 is the reset. The system collapses. The currency is destroyed. A new system is established, usually after a period of immense social pain and wealth transfer. The savings of the old middle class are wiped out, and the holders of hard assets emerge as the new elite. Just like Rome, just like Spain, just like Weimar, we are walking this path today. The pattern is unmistakable. Stage 1 and 2 are long behind us. We are deep into Stage 4 and transitioning into Stage 5. Look at the data. The global debt to GDP ratios are at levels never seen in peacetime. In the United States, the national debt is compounding at a rate that defies comprehension. The interest payments on this debt are now rivaling the defense budget. The banker of our era, the central banking apparatus, is behaving exactly like the rationalists and Rudolf Havenstein. They tell us that inflation is transitory. They tell us that they can manage a soft landing. They tell us that deficits don't matter, but the arithmetic is merciless. To keep the system liquid, they must print. If they stop printing, the deflationary collapse would trigger a depression that would make 1929 look like a picnic. The banking system, loaded with duration risk and commercial real estate bad debt, requires constant injections of liquidity. This is the banker's trap. The incentive is to keep the game going for one more election cycle, one more fiscal year. The risk is not just economic. It is social. We are seeing the early signs of the fracture. The wealth gap is widening, not because of capitalism, but because of the Cantillon effect, the phenomenon where those closest to the money printer get rich, while those furthest away suffer from inflation. The middle class is being priced out of housing, just like the Roman soldier Aurelius. The cost of living is rising faster than wages, just like in 16th century Spain. There are some who argue that this time is different. They say that technology will save us. They say that the dollar's status as the global reserve currency gives it a magical immunity. This is the exorbitant privilege, and it is true the U.S. has a longer runway than Weimar Germany or Venezuela. But a longer runway is not the same as a different destination. The laws of math do not care about your aircraft carriers. If you print more claims on wealth than you create wealth, the value of those claims will fall. Under these constraints, the rational move for the state is financial repression. This is the modern version of Diocletian's edict. It involves keeping interest rates below the rate of inflation to inflate away the debt. It involves capital controls. It involves changing the rules of the banking system to force institutions to buy government debt. The endgames are fixed. History offers only 3 exits from this room. The first is controlled decline. This is the optimistic scenario. The currency is slowly devalued over decades. Living standards stagnate, the middle class slowly erodes, but order is maintained. This is the path of post-imperial Britain. Second is chaotic collapse. The loss of confidence is sudden. The currency enters a hyperinflationary spiral, supply chains break. Civil unrest forces a regime change. This is the path of Weimar Zimbabwe and Venezuela. The third is reset and restructure. The government acknowledges the math. They default on their promises, either explicitly by restructuring debt or implicitly by pegging the currency to a new anchor gold, a commodity basket, or a new digital standard at a much higher price. This stabilizes the system, but at the cost of wiping out the purchasing power of the old currency. The pattern suggests we are moving toward a combination of repression and reset. The banker is already preparing the tools. Central bank digital currencies, yield curve control, bail-ins. These are the mechanisms of the next stage. The only variable is timing and pain. If you understand the history, you do not have to be a victim of it. You cannot stop the tide, but you can build a boat. You can educate yourself. You can look at the data without the filter of political bias. You can focus on resilience. Subscribe to this channel. We will continue to track the pattern stage by stage. We will continue to watch the man in the back room. The history books are being written right now. Make sure you are on the right side of the ledger.